Today on The Hookup, I'm going to put these 8 4K PoE security cameras through their paces and show you why, after countless hours of testing, I've decided that this camera from the relatively unknown brand Anki is the best value in 4K security cameras by a significant margin. In my last PoE security camera video, I tested all different resolutions of cameras under $150, and I ended up recommending the Reolink RLC410 as my favorite overall camera. The RLC410 is an extremely solid camera at a great price, and I've recommended it to countless people. But it's only 5 megapixels, and I've started to wonder if more pixels is more better. Which brings me to this video, which features only 8 megapixel cameras, commonly called 4K resolution. Here are the cameras that I'm going to test in this video from least expensive to most expensive. Links are down in the description of the exact cameras that I tested. First is the $69 HView E800D turret camera. Next is the $89 Anki C800 turret camera. Then the $108 Amcrest 2493 EW dome camera. Then the $109 Amcrest 2499E, which I have in both the 4mm focal length and the 2.8mm focal length varieties. Then we've got the $149 Hikvision 2CD 2385 FWD, the $169 Camius 828A Spotlight bullet camera, and finally the $199 Dahua HFW 2831T motorized varifocal bullet camera. You may notice that popular brands like Reolink, Lorex, and Swan are absent from this list, and that's because their 4K cameras don't support the ONVIF standard and therefore can only be used with their own NVRs, and not with PC-based NVRs like Blue Iris. If you're looking for a standalone 4K camera bundle, I've also made a comparison video between the 3 top-selling packages on Amazon, but only ONVIF cameras are going to be included in this video. Ubiquiti also makes a 4K camera, the G4 Pro, that isn't included in this video because of its $450 price tag, which is just too much to pay for a single camera in my opinion. The first thing we're going to look at is field of view. When you look at a camera listing, it's pretty common for it to list the focal length of the lens, which generally correlates to the field of view. But it's not the whole story. There's some complex math that you can do to determine the effective field of view using the focal length, sensor size, and lens shape. But the general idea is that field of view is a function of sensor size divided by focal length. Larger sensors and lower focal lengths will yield a larger field of view. To get a feeling for each camera's field of view, I attempted to line up the left side of the image with the corner of the sidewalk so that I can compare how far into my neighbor's yard the right side would reach. You can see that the Amcrest dome camera had the greatest field of view, even though it has the same 2.8mm focal length as some of the other cameras. And the Dahua had the second largest field of view, even though its minimum focal length is 3.7mm. This suggests that the Dahua has a significantly larger image sensor than the rest of the cameras. You can see that the least expensive camera, the HView, has roughly the same focal length as the Dahua, but the lowest field of view, indicating that it has a significantly smaller image sensor. And that's somewhat expected considering the Dahua is the most expensive camera and the HView is the cheapest. Generally speaking, we would expect cameras with lower fields of view to have a better, clearer image because each pixel needs to represent less space in the physical world. But that's not always the case. To test daytime clarity, I marked locations on the ground at 10 feet, 25 feet, and 50 feet, and I held up a sign with 150-point font and 72-point font. At 25 feet, the Anki and Hikvision produce the clearest images. It's tempting to say that the HView has the best image if you only consider the 150-point font, but the 72-point font is definitely more legible in the Anki and the Hikvision. Not to mention that the HView is distorted due to it using a 4:3 image sensor to produce a 16:9 widescreen image. You can also see the downfall of varifocal cameras here, where there's some chromatic aberration visible on the Dahua image. In a fixed focal length camera, the lens is tuned for one specific focal length, but a varifocal lens needs to be able to be adjusted, meaning it might not always be in its sweet spot. All things considered though, the Dahua image is actually really good considering how wide the field of view is, and it doesn't suffer from the field of view and clarity trade-off that's visible in the Amcrest dome, which struggled to produce a legible image of the 150-point font from just 25 feet away. At 50 feet, the results were similar, if not more exaggerated. The Anki and Hikvision still produced the best images, but the 72-point font is no longer legible. In the image from the Amcrest Dome camera, you can barely even tell that there's text on the sign. The Dahua and H-View produce comparable images, which is really bad news for the H-View considering how low its field of view was. As a comparison, I adjusted the Dahua's varifocal lens to be similar to the H-View's, and it produced this impressive image from 50 feet, though there is still some chromatic aberration. I repeated these same tests at night, both with and without infrared illumination. An increasingly popular and desired feature of cameras is something called color night vision. Cameras are able to produce color images in very low light situations by increasing their shutter duration, sensitivity, and gain. The downside of this mode is that moving objects create streaks due to the slower shutter speed. In the color night vision test, the Anki and Hikvision performed the best, followed by the two Amcrest cameras and then the Dahua. The Amcrest Dome camera performed the worst by far in this test. And even though the Camius gave some middle-of-the-road results, it's got another trick up its sleeve if you want color night vision. In addition to its infrared LEDs, the Camius also has two ultra-bright white LED spotlights that can be activated by motion to provide a significantly better color night vision experience. More commonly though, cameras use infrared LEDs for their night vision, which allows them to maintain faster shutter speeds and prevent streaking. In the IR test, the Dahua performed the best with its large image sensor, and then the 4mm focal length Amcrest. Next was the Anki, Hikvision, and then the Camius. You'll also notice that the H-View shot doesn't match the rest, and that's because for some reason I kept magically disappearing from the night footage. This is probably due to errors in video compression, which leads me to my next topic. 4K footage requires a ton of hard drive space, and recording 9 4K streams 24/7 is going to kill a hard drive really fast without proper compression. All these cameras have the option to use the more traditional H.264 compression standard or the significantly more efficient H.265 compression method. But not all H.265 is compatible with every NVR. That being said, the H-View is the only one that I had issues with. Not only was its H.265 encoding completely incompatible with my Blue Iris NVR software, but even the H.264 footage was unreliable, and multiple times during my testing, I randomly disappeared during the nighttime footage. For this reason alone, I cannot recommend the H-View to anyone, despite its low price. None of the other cameras that I had any issue with their compression. Along with compression type, each camera has tons of other options, and the web-based interfaces are more user-friendly than ever before. The Hikvision and Anki are fully compatible with the Chrome browser without any plugins or Adobe Flash, and the H-View and Dahua offered Live View in Chrome once Flash Player was activated. The settings on the Amcrest cameras can be adjusted in Chrome, but Live View is only available in Internet Explorer or after downloading and installing their Chrome add-on, which feels more like a separate browser than a Chrome add-on. The Camius was the only camera that required Internet Explorer to run, which was disappointing because it also offers the most customizability and options. For ease of initial setup, the Dahua, Camius, and Anki cameras were set up from the factory using DHCP, so they join right to your network using a compatible subnet. The rest of the cameras come from the factory with a static IP, which means you'll need to be able to access the 192.168.1.x subnet to be able to configure them. It's not an impossible task, but it's a little bit annoying. For the Amcrest cameras, you can also set them up using the Amcrest app, which allows you to scan a QR code and access them via P2P. And that leads me to my next point. As ironic as it is, security cameras have historically been some of the most vulnerable IoT devices. If you've ever set up a security camera using an app and then accessed the camera from outside of your network without setting up port forwarding on your router, you're likely using P2P. Unfortunately, using P2P means that your camera needs to be communicating with the manufacturer's P2P servers at all times, and that's a really bad plan for security and vulnerability in your network. How serious is it? Well, it's serious enough that the United States Department of Defense can no longer do business with contractors that use Dahua, Hikvision, or any of their OEM subsidiaries. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't use them, but it's a good idea to block their outbound traffic with your network's firewall. In fact, you probably shouldn't use P2P regardless of the manufacturer at all. So, as I mentioned at the beginning of this video, after countless hours of testing, the Anki 4K turret camera came out significantly ahead of the rest in overall value, with both the best daytime clarity and the best color night vision, all for just $89. So if you're looking for a great camera at a great price, the Anki is an easy choice. But I'd be remiss if I didn't mention some of the other important features that the other cameras have that I'll personally be taking advantage of. The Dahua's motorized varifocal lens makes it perfect for mounting on a second-story roofline. In this case, I'll be able to adjust the zoom as needed to account for the large viewing distance. And even though the Cameos spotlight didn't perform quite as well as the Anki, it has the added benefit of motion-based spotlight, which will go perfectly in my dark side yard that has no other lighting. If you also need audio from your security camera, unfortunately neither the Dahua nor the Anki have built-in microphones, so you're going to need to look elsewhere. Out of the other cameras that I tested, the Cameos has the clearest audio, and it actually includes two-way audio, though only through the RX CamView phone app. The Amcrest audio was also acceptable, but the H-Views was choppy and terrible, and I think I've already mentioned that there's no reason that you should ever buy this camera. The last question to answer is whether the increased file size and price is justified by increased image quality associated with 4K cameras. Comparing footage from my previous video to this one tells a pretty convincing story. The Reolink RLC410 produced this image from 25 feet, and when compared to the same image taken with the 4K Anki, not only is the field of view significantly wider, but in general the image is crisper and the text is more legible. So it really comes down to a question of price. The RLC410 costs around $43 these days compared to the $89 Anki, and even though the Anki produced a much higher quality image, I can't tell you whether it's worth twice the price, because that's a personal decision based on your own budget. If you have a high quality 4K ONVIF camera that I missed, make sure to let me know down in the comments so I can check it out. Thank you to all of my awesome patrons over at Patreon that enable me to buy products and make videos like this one to help you make the best choices when buying new products. If you're interested in supporting my channel, please check out the links down in the description. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that thumbs up button so the YouTube algorithm will share it with other people. Please consider subscribing, and as always, thanks for watching The Hookup.